So as you guys may or may not know, I did a Mount Rushmore of DC heroes and also Marvel heroes, but now we're getting into the really fun stuff because with the heroes, it's more like, I feel like with DC especially, pretty decided. I feel like most people are going to have Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman in their top three. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But with the villains, which is what I'm doing today, it gives you a little bit more freedom. And specifically, I'm doing Batman villains. I did it this way because I will do a DC villains tier, or not tier list, Mount Rushmore. But Batman villains, his rogues gallery is so iconic and dense that I feel like this deserves its own video entirely. Just because of, like I said, how insane his rogues gallery is. So, without further ado, we shall get into it. And my first pick, in no particular order, again, that's how I do these, is going to be Scarecrow. Now, obviously, with any comic book property type thing, there's multiple versions of this character with different names throughout the history. But the one that I know, that one that most people know, the one we get most versions of is Jonathan Crane, Dr. Jonathan Crane. Scarecrow is a very interesting villain and a very interesting pick for me. If you guys haven't seen the Gotham show, I feel like they did Scarecrow really good in that because they set him up and he's honestly just like, you feel bad for him, he's a troubled guy, but he's not inherently a bad guy. He just has a bad life. And I feel like that could be said for a lot of Batman villains. I think that's why a lot of people want them to have redemption arcs. I've seen that come up quite a bit lately, where people want most of, if not all of Batman's rogues gallery to have a redemption arc run. And I'm not really a fan of that, but I can see the vision. I can see why people want that and why people say that. With that being said, Scarecrow is interesting for that reason. He's a doctor, he's a psychologist, he's a therapist. And no matter what version you've seen of him, I feel like they've all been pretty strong. Like the Cillian Murphy version in the Nolan trilogy. I mean, he's in all three of those, and he is awesome throughout all three. Then you have the Batman the Animated Series version, which is a little bit more like, I would say campier, honestly, a little bit more lighter, while still being dark. I mean, Scarecrow is just a dark character in general. He makes you see your worst fears. He can play on those. He's a very weak character physically, and you could even argue mentally, given what happens to him. But it's interesting how he plays to his strengths, for sure. And then you have versions like the Batman Arkham games, which are straight up horror scenarios. I mean, I've talked about that. I made a video about the Arkham series, or at least Arkham Asylum, and that was just, it traumatized me as a kid. And if you guys played that game when you were younger, I bet you have the same experience. My point is, no matter what version of Scarecrow you find, I feel like it's a good version. He's an interesting character because, again, you feel bad for him in a way. Like, he didn't start out as a bad guy, but he becomes one. And that's kind of, Batman's rogues gallery in a nutshell. And I just find him to be very interesting. Next up, I have Clayface. Clayface is an iconic Batman villain, one that, in my opinion, is super underutilized, especially considering how terrifying he can be and how just overwhelming he can be for Batman. I mean, the problem with Clayface is he's hard to do in live action just because it's one of those things where a lot of, if not, you could argue all Batman live action movies have taken a more grounded or like semi-realistic approach. So it's kind of hard to do a guy made out of clay in that. But you have things like Batman the Animated Series, or he's appeared a lot through animation. He recently appeared in Creature Commandos, which I was not a fan of. But my main experience with Clayface is the I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, Matt Hagen version. And my main experience was with the animated series version. So I just fell in love with him because of that. I remember being introduced to him and the accident that happened to him causing him to become what he is. I mean, again, like Scarecrow, it's really tragic. It is. And he has a lot of complexity in his in terms of like his psychology behind why he does what he does and who he is as a person, but also just like the body horror. I mean, if you don't know they're doing a Clayface movie, which I'm not opposed to, but I do think it is interesting to do a solo Clayface movie. However, I am excited because it's supposed to be body horror. The screenplay is written by Mike Flanagan. I think it's going to be awesome. I really do. I'm loving the vibes I've seen so far from the set pictures released. And I'm excited because Clayface, as I've said when I started this pick, he is very underutilized. And I wish he wasn't because I just think he's awesome. I don't really have much more experience with him outside of Batman the Animated Series, but for me, that was enough to put him on this list because it stuck with me for so long. I mean, saw it when I was a kid, and I just will always remember it. And I think the other interesting thing to his character is, at least in the version I saw in the animated series, if I remember correctly, he was an actor. And it's just so, I guess, ironic in a horrible way that the guy who was an actor playing, multiple different people becomes this amorphous blob of clay that can transform into multiple different things, but he can never be human. I mean, that's like super tragic. That I just don't really know how else to frame that other than that. So I'm a really big fan of this character. I'm a really big fan of the backstory and what they do with him. And I'm excited to see where he goes in live action. Third on the list, I have Mr. Freeze, or Victor Freeze. If you don't know, Mr. Freeze is, again, another, he's been in a movie, but I think he is a pretty underutilized character. The most iconic version for me was the animated series, with the red goggles, the almost like alien, head cone thing, the blue suit. I mean, it's awesome. And then from there, we've had really great versions, honest. I mean, like Gotham, for example, that the Batman prequel show, like I was talking about, they did Mr. Freeze, and I was skeptical, but it turned out really well too. The only time I will say that it kind of really faltered was, unfortunately, Arnold's version. And I do have, like, a lot of love for that version for different reasons, like more so like nostalgia reasons, but definitively it is a bad version of the character. It just is, so there's no getting around that. But Victor Freeze is another very tragic character. He's a brilliant scientist who had to cryogenically freeze his wife, Nora, to save her from a disease. And that's like my worst nightmare. My wife is my best friend. I honestly wouldn't be able to live without her, but at the same time, I would go through hell and back to save her. And if that means cryogenically freezing her to preserve her until I could find a cure, I mean, I can't think of anything more slightly psychotic, but also romantic. I mean, the man clearly loves his wife, and it's awful because he becomes what he does because of that love. A lab accident involving his employer, alters his body, and it makes him unable to survive in normal temperatures, which requires that cryogenic suit that he has to live. And again, his main goal is just to find a cure for Nora, which is tragic because it leads him to committing these crimes and to doing these bad things so he can fund that research. And that's what gets him on Batman's radar. And I don't know, it's just, it really is awful. And there's versions that I remember watching. I can't remember if it is in the animated series or not, but there's versions where I remember, Batman he cares for Freeze. Like he can understand where the man is coming from. He understands why he does what he's doing. It's still wrong. He still has to put him in Arkham, and he still has to stop the guy, but he does get it. Now, obviously, there are versions of Freeze, as I've mentioned, like with Arnold, where he's just a campy villain, or like he's just a maniacal villain to be a villain. I'm not really a fan of those versions. I've seen a bit of them. I don't really like it. I like the more like tragic, romantic take. And even Gotham did that a little bit with it, if I remember correctly, which probably is why I loved that version of the character. But yeah, I mean, Freeze belongs in this list. Another super underutilized character. He is hard to do in live action with, if you do a practical Batman like Pattinson's, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to see it. Now, last but not least, you all probably can guess what this is going to be. And if you're new here, I don't make picks to be like edgy or different or unique. I just pick honestly. Like, what I feel is what I feel. And my fourth pick is the Joker. I mean, there's really no getting around it. Now, the Joker is not like my favorite villain of all time, like a lot of people's, but when you're talking Batman villains, the Joker is on Mount Rushmore. It's like not putting Lex with Superman or Green Goblin with Spider-Man. Like, some heroes just have their villains, like they're iconic villains that you need. And Joker is that. There's multiple different versions of the character, but for the most part, he's always a clown. He's always psychotic. And the character has been taken in some cringy directions, mainly by, certain fans or whatever. But as a whole, I think the Joker is a fantastic character to this day. There have been very few bad versions. The only ones I haven't really liked, in all honesty, are Arthur Fleck, the Joaquin Phoenix version, and Jared Leto. I used to like Jared Leto's version, but, I've gotten older. I've come to my senses. Heath Ledger's Joker obviously has his place for a reason. Not my favorite, to be honest, but I do understand it. My favorite live action would be Jack Nicholson. I think he is a perfect blend. And then my favorite overall is definitely the animated series. I mean, Mark Hamill crushes that role. I don't care what you think of Mark Hamill, what you think of the animated series. Undeniably, the Joker is one of, if not the greatest things to that version to come out of that show. So I am pretty happy to have to have a favorite hero that has such an iconic rogues gallery, because again, these characters are all very interesting for very different reasons, but also very similar. Like, a lot of them are pretty tragic. The only one you could argue that really isn't, who is just crazy just to be crazy, is the Joker. And I could see that argument. However, there's a version for everything. So if you want to say like, oh no, he actually was relatable or like tragic, that has happened before, yes. But again, everything has happened at least once in the comics or in some form of media with characters this big. So I do think Joker belongs in this list. And that's my 4 picks: Joker, Clayface, Mr. Freeze, and Scarecrow. So let me know what you think down below. Let me know who your favorite villain is. Now, I don't rank these, but if I had to rank them, if I had to pick, I honestly would probably pick Mr. Freeze as my favorite. I just think he is out of all of them, he's the most like relatable in terms of like, would I go through that to save my wife? Yeah, I'd go through anything to save my wife. I would do whatever it takes. And there's something so almost like heroic about that, honestly. But it's just tragic because he does become a villain. So, yeah. I want to see more of these characters, though. Obviously, maybe not Joker. I feel like we've had a pretty good fill of the Joker. But, yeah, I'm interested to see where DC takes these characters. And I think these are all iconic. But the good thing with Batman villains especially, I feel like you really can't go wrong. Outside of, like, maybe once you get past, like, 10 or 15 of them, you can get kind of out there, kind of crazy. Some Calendar Man action, some Condiment King. But easily the most iconic rogues gallery. In my opinion, the most iconic hero. So, yeah, this was a pretty easy list for me, a pretty fun one. I just love talking Batman on this channel. I almost feel like I should rebrand the channel to that specifically, but nonetheless, be on the lookout for more of my rankings, quote unquote, or lists like these. I like making them, so hopefully you guys enjoy watching them. If you stuck around this long, I do appreciate it. Thank you for being here, and I will see you guys in the next one.